You never know what to expect from an interview with Robin Williams, so I often wondered what he'd be like on Fresh Air. I found out in the summer of 2006 when his film The Night Listener was released. I really enjoyed the interview. Was the kind of improvisational, eccentric humor that made you famous ever considered a problem? And here's what I'm asking. But here's what I mean by that. Did you behave in that kind of way with a lot of like zany characters popping out from you when you were young at times that were considered inappropriate, like
not
in
at
school?
all. I was very quiet. No. In school, I was very quiet and very kind of, I went to an all-boys private school for high school, and then went to a public high school in San Francisco in 1969. Was like the yin and yang of education. So I never really started to even be funny openly on that level. I was a closet comedian for so many years. And the idea of finally just letting it out was in the senior year of high school, where they had like a play where you could make fun of everything. And that was the first time I really had a performance. I was serious about a student, as serious a student as you could be, cum laude society and the whole thing. And an athlete. So it was all kind of, go ahead. I remember the motto of my private school was mens sano in corpore sano, in sound mind and sound body. It's a bit like the school in Dead Poets Society, and I was one of the students going, yes, and then luckily I had a few teachers, a history teacher who told me that, history is one of the great black comedies of all time. It's just on who's writing it. And all of a sudden I went, wait a minute, I can use these skills. And then when I went to college, that's where it really came out big time, and a chance to perform in an improv theater company, mainly to meet girls. As you find out from a lot of people, when I talked to Rod Steiger years ago, he said, I went to an acting class, not necessarily to act, but to meet women. But you get the idea that, it started then, but no, they weren't, and it still isn't. I mean, a woman came up to me in an airport one time and said, be zany. I went, pardon? Be zany. She wanted me to just, it's a bit like what Jon Stewart said, be a little monkey boy. Come on, dance,
Oh, what he said on cable. Right.
Yeah.
On Crossfire, yeah.
So I mean, it's that thing they want you to kind of, be that thing, and it's like, no. Sometimes it's fun, and I'll play if the moment's right. If it's like, if there's an opportunity, yeah. And if not, I'll talk straight with you. We can talk about that. It'd be cool.
What kind of roles were you cast in college? We're talking Juilliard.
when I actually started, Juilliard, all different types of roles. I remember we did a production of Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was one of the rustics, the guys who are, the union guys in the middle of the Shakespeare play. They're there doing their play, and it was, you do the whole gamut. But that was also where I started to play a little bit more, and realized that I had I'm more of a character comedian than the leading man, who I went to school with. Chris Reeves and a lot of people, Bill Hurt, Mandy Patinkin. They were all there at the time, and hardcore, intense actors. And I'm like, oh, that's cool, but I'd rather play.
So, now how did that lead to comedy?
I think it led to comedy as a survival mechanism, especially when I left school and went back to San Francisco and couldn't find acting work and saw this thing like it said comedy workshop. And I went, it's like syntax repair. Interesting. So I went to this workshop in the basement of a Lutheran church and it was stand-up comedy, so you don't get to improvise with others. But I started off doing ostensibly it was like improvising but solo. And then it started to realize, I'm building an act from there. And then you went from the workshop to actually clubs, which at that time were usually music or folk music clubs that put comedy on as almost like, interstitials in between the acts. And it was pretty wild. I mean, even in the workshop, we have comedy night after they had an evening of lesbian poetry, which brings in a really interesting audience for comedy, especially if you're a male stand-up. And it starts it builds up, you with your big pick violence. Thank you, and please welcome. And it was kind of fun to see that builds up. And performing comedy in San Francisco to begin with is pretty wild. You've got the human game preserve to play off of, And it's a lot of great characters everywhere. And you work off that, and then you play the rooms, and eventually you get to a point where you're playing a club that is a comedy club with other comics, and it's like, now you're among your brethren.
You got started doing stand-up comedy in, the 70s probably, right, or 80s?
Yeah, the 70s, mid to late 70s, yeah.
So it's kind of like the early days of the whole comedy boom?
Yeah.
Who were you then?
Sample complete. Ready to continue?